선생님, 세상의 모든 것은 한 자리에 있다고 늘 말씀하셨지요. 언젠가 그 말을 이해하고 싶었습니다. 미혹된 자는 굽은 등을 갖게 마련이니까요. 심장이 있던 자리에 한 마리 새를 키우게 되었습니다. 잠결에 날아와 둥지를 틀더니 나가지 않아서 쫓아내려 애를 쓰다 그만 포기하고 말았습니다. 이름을 붙여주고 나니 이제는 이국의 유일한 식구가 되었습니다. 너무 아름다운 것은 때로 삶이 아닌 죽음에 육박한다는 것을 한 번도 상상한 적 없는 채 살 수 있었다면 저는 달라질 수 있었을까요? 봄은 그토록 서늘하기에 유리처럼 빛날 수 있다고. 제가 시를 쓸 때 항상 뭔가를 감춘다고 생각을 하거든요. 그렇기 때문에 알레고리로 시를 쓰는 경우도 많고 좀 현실에 있지 않은 정황이나 인물들을 끌어와서 쓰기도 하고 이 세계에 존재하지 않는 공간에서 시가 진행되기도 하고요. 그럼에도 불구하고 되게 솔직하다고 느끼신다면 그거는 아마 굉장히 시가 육박해 들어오는 지점이 있다는 칭찬이 아닐까 그렇게 느껴지고, 저는 그 세계에 벌어진 부분이 있다고 생각을 해요. 그런데 그 부분을 제가 계속 응시하고 고개를 돌리지 않으려고 애를 쓰기 때문에 그 지점에서 불편함이라는 게 발생하는 게 아닐까 하고 생각합니다. 네. 제 꿈이라고 하면 조금 거창하지만 저는 계속 시를 쓰는 게 꿈입니다. 계속해서 자기 갱신을 하면서 써나가는 것. 네.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, May 20th, here in South Korea. Polling stations overseas are opening doors on this Tuesday for registered Korean voters there to cast their ballots for the 21st presidential election while candidates continue to rally support from voters here at home. Meanwhile, a South Korean trade delegation departs for the U.S. today to engage in more technical talks on tariffs, following a meeting between Trade Minister An Deok-gun and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer here in Korea last week. And U.S. President Donald Trump speaks on the phone with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for over 2 hours regarding potential peace in Ukraine. And while they both claim the talks went well, few details have been shared. Hello and welcome to the Daily Report. I'm Min San-hee. Overseas Korean voters have begun casting their ballots, with polling stations in New Zealand among the first to open on this Tuesday for South Korea's presidential election. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Overseas voting for South Korea's 21st presidential election is now underway, beginning Tuesday for 118 countries around the world. The first of the ballots were cast in New Zealand and Fiji, with polls expected to close last in Hawaii. According to the National Election Commission, overseas ballots for registered voters will be held over 6 days until Sunday local time at 182 Korean embassies, consulates, diplomatic missions and offices. Voting hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 39 additional polling stations have been installed where the number of overseas nationals exceeds 30,000. In the United States, these include the states of New York, California, Massachusetts and Texas, opening from Thursday to Saturday. Voting booths were also added for the Korean military's Dongmyeong unit in Lebanon and the Hanbit unit in Uganda. Specific times and locations can be found on consulate websites. When heading out to the ballot booth, voters must bring proof of identification which has a photo on it. Those who have immigrated or acquired permanent residency must also present proof that they remain solely Korean nationals. These include official documents for visas and permanent residency cards. As requirements differ according to the country of residence, voters must check their respective embassy or consulate website. Also, registered overseas voters who are visiting Korea or are unable to vote in their country of residence can join domestic voters on June 3rd at designated polling stations. But first, they must register in person between next Monday and June 3rd at an election office located in the district of their last registered Korean address. Over 258,000 are expected to cast overseas votes, 14% more than the last presidential election. This time, overseas polling stations were established for the first time in 4 countries where diplomatic missions were recently opened: Cuba, Luxembourg, Lithuania and Estonia. Overseas ballots are returned to Korea via diplomatic pouches to be counted together with domestic votes after Election Day voting ends. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Acting President Lee Joo-ho has called for commitment to conducting a fair and transparent election as overseas voting begins today. The remarks were made during a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday as he called on the National Election Commission to ensure the safe management and transportation of ballot boxes from overseas once voting by registered Korean voters there ends this coming Sunday. Also, with the official voting day here now precisely 2 weeks away, the acting leader also urged relevant ministries to actively support the efforts of the Election Commission. And now turning to the latest on the campaign trail, Liberal Party contender Lee Jae-myung addressed his supporters in the city of Paju today. I have our political correspondent Shin Ha-young standing by live with details. Ha-young, it's good to have you on. Do fill us in then.
Sure, Sunny. I'm currently out here in front of a community station at Paju in Gyeonggi-do province, which borders North Korea. And Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung is now delivering his speech seeking voter support. And during his speech, he addressed people's livelihoods and also mentioned about the distribution of local vouchers. And before coming to Paju, he held a rally in Uijeongbu where he spoke about peace and security. Take a listen.
Hasn't this northern region made big sacrifices for the country's security over many years? Those sacrifices should be properly compensated, so people from now on don't feel it's unfair.
At his final stop of the day in Gimpo, he is expected to reveal a plan to cut travel time between Gimpo and Seoul's Gangnam area to around 30 minutes.
Right, and Hayoung, as we mentioned earlier, overseas voting began today, and I understand Lee Jae-myung touched upon this particular reality. Could you tell us more?
Sure, Sunny. Marking the first day of overseas voting, Lee Jae-myung held a one-hour virtual meeting with overseas Koreans ahead of today's rally. And during the discussion, overseas voters from various countries shared the common difficulties they face, especially regarding the inconvenience of voting. Take a listen.
Botswana has no Korean embassy or consulate general, so Koreans here have to go to South Africa to vote.
And after the event, I had a chance to ask Lee about ways to ensure voting rights for overseas Koreans, including thoughts on mail-in voting. And he said that appropriate measures should be put in place to ease voting for those living abroad and suggested several ways to do so. Take a listen.
Overseas Koreans currently have to register and vote separately, but with a better system, both could be done at once. While some worry about mail-in voting security, countries like the US use it, and Korea already allows similar voting for people with mobility issues or those in hospital. I wonder if it's fair to not allow overseas Koreans to vote by mail.
He also suggested setting up temporary polling stations with temporary staff, saying that given the high personal costs voters currently face, the government should provide such kind of support. That's all for this hour. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Hayoung, thank you for that coverage of the Liberal camp. Up next, we turn to the Conservative camp, whose contender Kim Moon-soo is also campaigning in the Greater Seoul region. For details, I have our Kim Do-yeon joining me live. Do-yeon, welcome back. So where exactly are you joining us from then?
That's right, Sunny. I'm currently in Hanam City at a shopping mall where Kim is about to appear on the stage in about 30 minutes right behind me. Now, he has been rallying throughout the day and he's been focusing his message that he's more ethical than his DP rival Lee Jae-myung, and that the DP is using its supermajority to pass legislation to protect Lee from his legal risks. Take a listen.
I'll be an ethical president. I will never wear a bulletproof vest. I would get rid of the bulletproof glass and never try to pass bulletproof legislation.
Of course, here he's trying to tie Lee's recent upgraded security measures to the DP's legislative efforts. He also reiterated that it was he who created Gyeonggi-do province's economic zones, such as Pyeongtaek's Samsung Electronics plant, the largest one in the world, comparing his success as the province's governor to that of Lee's. Earlier in the day, he toured around Seoul meeting with members of the public in the streets. Now, he also shared his pledges on fostering culture and cultural activities as he visited a culture and arts organization. His major pledge was to make community culture centers across the nation accessible to anyone within 10 minutes to enhance culture and art activities.
Also, Do-yeon, I hear Kim sought to reach out to his conservative rival Lee Jun-seok of the Reform Party yet again.
That's right, Sunny. Earlier in the day, as he faced the media, he repeated his message that he and his policies align closely and that it was PPP's fault for making Reform Party's leave the PPP. Take a listen.
He used to lead our party. As you've seen at the debate, there's absolutely no difference between us. Also, it was our party's problem that caused Lee Jun-seok to leave. So I think it's right to be together.
Of course, Lee Jun-seok rejected that offer again, but a movement to form an anti-Lee Jae-myung bloc started moving for the PPP as the interim leader Kim Yong-tae met with the new Future Democratic Party's chairman for talks on future cooperation. This is a new party made up of former DP members who are not in Lee Jae-myung's faction. The leader of this party said the PPP's constitutional reform proposal of shortening the next president's term to 3 years with the next one starting a new 4-year term with re-election aligns with theirs. In the meantime, the PPP DPP's Kim Young-tae also proposed a debate for the First Lady prospects, but the DP and Reform Party candidates immediately criticized the idea to turn it down. That's all for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Toyon, as always, thank you for the coverage of the Conservative camp. Staying on the campaign trail, Reform Party candidate Jun-seok remained active in the southwestern city of Gwangju for a second day on this Tuesday. Addressing the audience there, he spoke of pursuing the spirit of former President Roh Moo-hyun, who sought unity between traditionally conservative and liberal regions in the southwest and eastern parts of the country. He was also at Cheonnam National University to touch base with the student body there as part of his campus cafeteria outreach. Earlier, he sat down with the Gwangju Mayor Kang Ki-jong and pledged support for AI and future mobility industries. A South Korean trade delegation has departed for the U.S. to engage in more technical talks on tariffs. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun covers the agenda ahead.
A South Korean delegation will begin working-level talks with a U.S. trade representative in Washington on Tuesday local time as part of broader efforts to finalize what's being dubbed the July package. With both sides aiming for a comprehensive trade deal by July 8th, Seoul is expected to focus on minimizing the steep tariffs on its key exports. However, time is tight, with the U.S. negotiating with its other trade partners and South Korea's presidential election just around the corner. 6 key topics are on the agenda for this round of technical discussions: balanced trade, non-tariff measures, economic security, digital trade, country of origin, and commercial considerations. South Korea plans to use its cooperation in areas like shipbuilding as leverage, with the ultimate goal of lowering the 25% reciprocal tariff rates and the sector-specific tariffs on cars, steel, aluminium, and semiconductors. Meanwhile, the U.S. is expected to push back with its own demands, with concerns over its trade deficit and various non-tariff barrier issues. The Trump administration has pointed to a wide range of non-tariff barriers in Korea, such as restrictions on importing beef from cattle older than 30 months, as hindering American exports to the country. Seoul has since responded by saying there were few barriers hindering trade with the United States, and experts say that some concessions could be made for low-impact sectors in order to gain leverage in more critical areas.
We should be ready to ease non-tariff barriers on items like agricultural and livestock products, especially those with low import volumes. In return, we must push hard to secure U.S. tariff cuts on high-value exports, like automobiles and semiconductors.
This comes after high-level ministerial meetings during the APEC Trade Summit in Jeju last week, where South Korea's Trade Minister An Duk-gun followed up his meeting with the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer with a press conference. He revealed that a ministerial-level interim review is scheduled for mid-June to finalize the results of the negotiations, meaning that important decisions related to the trade agreement will be made by the next administration. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea's auto exports to the U.S. market tumbled some 20% in April on year. Findings by the Trade Ministry released on this Tuesday show auto shipments to the U.S. amounted to almost $2.9 billion last month, down 19.6% on year. This latest performance is being linked to U.S. tariffs and the launch of a new Hyundai Motor Group plant in the state of Georgia. Meanwhile, overall auto exports in April was also down nearly 4% on year at $6.5 billion. But here at home, car sales rose 6.7% last month on year, driven by demand for electric and hybrid vehicles. U.S. President Donald Trump spoke on the phone with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin about potential peace in Ukraine. And while they both say the talks went well, few details have been shared. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peun-ji reports.
Following the much-anticipated call between leaders from Washington and Moscow, U.S. President Donald Trump said he made progress during his conversation on Monday with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. He proclaimed on his social media that the call went very well and that Russia and Ukraine had agreed to immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire, without providing details on when that will happen.
We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made.
Putin, who described the call as meaningful and frank, said Russia is ready to work with Ukraine on a memorandum on a possible future peace agreement. But he did not address demands from the U.S. and European countries for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, meaning no major breakthrough in ending the war.
At the same time, I would like to note that in general, Russia's position is clear. The main thing for us is to eliminate the root causes of this crisis.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he also spoke with Trump before the American leader's call with Putin. He called for an unconditional ceasefire, while urging stronger U.S. sanctions if Russia is not ready to end the war.
I asked him, before his conversation with Putin, not to make decisions about Ukraine without us. We agreed that we would get in touch after his conversation with Putin.
Zelensky also urged Washington not to distance itself from peace talks, saying he is considering a high-level meeting between Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., and European countries. This comes after Trump said the conditions of a peace deal could only be negotiated between Russia and Ukraine, possibly with the help of the Pope, leading to speculation that this signals a possible shift in his stance, that he was leaving the two countries to find a deal without the U.S. as a broker. 배은지, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to seize control of the entire Gaza Strip. Our Lee Seung-jae covers his intentions and more.
The Israeli military, which recently launched Operation Gideon's Chariots, aimed at recapturing the Gaza Strip, announced it has struck some 160 targets, including Hamas infrastructure. However, according to Al Jazeera, airstrikes also targeted several hospitals across the enclave. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a video statement on the same day, vowing to make progress amid fierce fighting, adding that Israel will take control of the entire Gaza Strip. The remark was slammed by Britain, France, and Canada, who are critical of Israel's expansion of its war, as they vowed a concrete response if Israel's campaign continues. Also following pressure from around the globe over the blocking of any humanitarian aid into the region, Israel has begun allowing some trucks carrying necessities.
Today, Israel is facilitating the entry of trucks with baby food into Gaza. In the coming days, Israel will facilitate the entry of dozens of aid trucks.
The Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry, Eden Bartal, said Israel always complies with international law and with its obligations and statements. However, he was critical of the recent condemnation, saying the international community must decide whether to side with Israel or Hamas. He added that the aid that began coming in will only cover a few days. The Foreign Ministry official also stressed that the humanitarian aid is to help the population, not to support Hamas. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean military believes North Korea's air-to-air missile technology may have been advanced with Russian assistance. Now, this belief is in line with earlier remarks by analysts here, who suggested Pyongyang may have received radar or software technology from Moscow in return for troop deployment. Last week, the regime conducted its first live fire test of an air-to-air missile that reportedly successfully intercepted targets. With regard to this latter claim, military authorities here have countered its credibility, adding that actual deployment could take considerable time. Relevant authorities, in the meantime, are seeking to assess the extent of Russian involvement in the missile's development.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. 5 years after the United Kingdom departed from the European Union, a new agreement has been reached between the two parties. The deal announced on Monday includes defense cooperation and youth mobility. At a summit in London on May 19th, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled a comprehensive agreement to improve post-Brexit relations. It includes a new defense and security partnership, granting the UK access to a $200 billion EU defense fund, and facilitating joint military procurement and support for Ukraine's defense. The agreement also extends mutual fishing access for 12 years, allowing EU vessels to continue operating in UK waters. A youth mobility scheme will facilitate temporary work and study exchanges between the UK and EU member states. British travellers will also benefit from faster airport procedures through EU e-gates. Prime Minister Starmer lauded the agreement as a win-win, while EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen described the progress as historic. The U.S. Supreme Court has allowed the Trump administration to terminate the temporary protected status for approximately 350,000 Venezuelan nationals living in the country. In an unsigned order on Monday, the Supreme Court lifted a lower court's injunction that blocked the Department of Homeland Security's attempt to end TPS for Venezuelans. This decision allows the administration to revoke protection extended until October 2026 during the Biden administration. TPS provides temporary legal status and work authorization to individuals from countries experiencing severe crises. The Biden administration granted Venezuelans an extension of the status in response to ongoing political and economic instability in Venezuela. TPS has also been removed for nationals from Afghanistan and Cameroon as part of the Trump administration's efforts to tighten immigration policies. Former U.S. President Joe Biden expressed gratitude for the support he has received from around the world after announcing on Sunday that he has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that has metastasized to the bones. Biden wrote on his social media on Monday, "Cancer touches us all, and that he and his wife Jill have learned that you are strongest in the broken places." Reacting to the announcement, President Donald Trump said Biden's diagnosis was very sad, but added that he was surprised it wasn't detected earlier. At the same time, he and First Lady Melania wished Biden a fast and successful recovery. While not curable, experts note that effective management can allow patients to live for several years. Finally, in Denmark, the 14th Hundested Sand Sculpture Festival kicks off on Friday. The annual event will feature sand sculptures crafted by 16 international artists centered around this year's theme of Showtime. Visitors can expect to see detailed representations of entertainment icons such as Charlie Chaplin and Miss Piggy, as well as circus clowns. The festival also offers diverse family-friendly activities, including sculpting workshops, sand painting, and treasure hunts. As the festival runs through October 19th, the sculptures are made of sand mixed with clay to ensure they last until autumn. The sand is reused each year. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The early summer lake heat appeared today across the country. The highest daytime temperature in Seoul was 26 degrees Celsius, but with the high humidity, it felt even hotter at 28 degrees. The southern parts of the country, red on the map, were as hot as 30 degrees today. It will be a bit hotter tomorrow nationwide. Rain is forecast for many parts of the east tomorrow. Estimated rainfall will be up to 40 millimeters in eastern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and Gangwon-do province, and up to 60 millimeters in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island. Tomorrow morning will start warm at around 20 degrees all over the country. Highs will move up to 28 degrees in Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju. UV rays will also be very strong during the day. Please be prepared in advance for when you go outside. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. A panel session is coming up next, so do stay with us. Thank you as always for watching.
제21대 대통령 재외선거.
세계 어느 곳에 있어도
내가 국가대표라는 마음으로
누구보다 땀 흘리죠. 지금이 국가대표임을
보여줄 기회.
대한민국 국민의 권리.
대한민국 국민의 의무.
반드시
투표합니다. 국가를 위한 대통령 투표. 제21대 대통령 재외선거. 중앙선거관리위원회.
2025 celebrates the 80th anniversary of liberation. A place filled with culture, history, and diverse experiences. This is the Independence Hall of Korea. Upholding the values of the independence movement, and together with the whole nation, we will make Korea great. The Independence Hall of Korea.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors, grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
findings show a record rise in the number of foreign residents here in South Korea. And this reality is fueling active social commentary here and elsewhere. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today, that is May 20th, Korea celebrates Together Day, a day formally set by the Justice Ministry here back in the year 2007 to promote cultural diversity and to foster an inclusive society. Accordingly, today we touch upon the life of our foreign residents here in the country. For more on this, I have a freelance reporter, David Lee, here in the studio. David, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
I also have Rui Valdez with Spanish news agency EFE Spain. Rui, as always, it's good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
David, we will start with you. So foreign residents here in South Korea now account for roughly 5% of the total population. Let's begin with more details about this particular reality.
Yeah, so the OECD considers a country to have a multicultural society if, like you said, the foreign-born population is above 5% of the total population. So according to Justice Ministry figures, South Korea can be considered a multicultural society today. So it currently has 2.65 million foreign-born residents. Interesting fact is that in 2023, it had the second fastest growth rate in terms of the foreign-born nationals, which attributed to a population uptick a couple years ago. And if you look at if you compare it to other OECD countries, they generally tend to have a population, foreign population that's over 10% of the total population, such as the US and Germany both have close to 14%. Switzerland has the most with close to 27%. Just a little background to South Korea's foreign population. It reached 1 million in 2007 and 2 million in 2016. And a big year was in 2004 when the government enforced the employment permit system, which sort of systematically led to South Korean companies recruiting qualified foreign workers to come and work here, giving them the legal visas and the permits to work. And more recently, in 2022, the government, they upped the foreign worker quota, and they made some policy changes to the migrant worker working, conditions. And this was due to a shortage in labor and also due to the record low birth rate in the country. I think just one more point I want to point out is that we have, for the first time, over 1 million foreign workers in the country. And this has been emphasized to be a key factor for the future growth of the country, as we need a lot of labor, manpower for our export-intensive economy in the manufacturing, shipbuilding sectors. So most of these workers are filled by simple labor jobs in regional areas.
Right. Rui, let's expand on what David just said. So the number of foreign workers here in South Korea hit over 1 million last year for the first time. That being said, how does this level of participation compare to the foreign labor participation seen in other countries, like, for instance, Spain?
Yes, well, starting with the specific case of Korea, as David was mentioning, there's more than 1.5 million foreign workers right now on working age, or foreigners on working age. This represents, this data from 2024 represents a 9.1% increase year on year, which is the highest increase since 2012, which means that the demographic landscape in Korea is significantly changing. In the areas that they are working, most of them are in manufacturing, this is 45.6%, also wholesale, retail and food services, personal and public services, and construction, around all this between 18 and 10%. Men dominate, of course. In the data it says that with E9 visa jobs, which means that 90.9% of the foreign workers are men. Yeah, the women on their side, they are mostly marriage migrants. The 79.6% of women are marriage migrants, which means migrants that usually marry a local, a South Korean, and they just stay in the country with a special marriage visa. Then we have that the majority of these foreign workers are from Asia. This is 91%. Most of them are ethnic Koreans from China, Vietnam in second place, and China particularly with 8.6%. Being that said, there's still some challenges before comparing with Spain. There are significant income gaps, limited mobility, and social pressures that these migrants face. For example, most of them earn an average salary, a salary that is below the average of Korea. 51% of them earn between 2 and 3 million won a month, and only 37.5% above 3 million. The average salary in Korea is 3.3 million Korean won. Then, as a main stressor factor is education costs, which are quite high in Korea. For foreigners that have kids, this is a challenge. And despite they have a relatively self-reported satisfaction, they report having restricted job mobility, and of course these wage parity problems that I just mentioned. Just quickly, to not extend too much, to compare with the numbers that David mentioned, in Spain, foreign-born workers make up 13% of the labor force. This means that, these foreign workers contribute with 80% of the GDP growth, contributed with 80% of the GDP growth between 2019 and 2024, according to data of the European Central Bank. But there is a catch here. Why these migrants are able to adapt and contribute more to the economy? Because in Spain, many migrants come from Latin America. So there is a high language advantage. Since they know the local language and have familiarity with the culture, they tend to adapt faster. That being said, we need to consider that these migrants, just as in Korea, as mentioned by David, don't necessarily occupy mostly high-skilled jobs. They are also in similar areas than the foreign workers in Korea, but they seem to be contributing much more. Also, to end, Spain invests a lot in housing assistance and work permits and has a long-term view to invite more immigration into the country to contribute economically.
Right, and before we touch upon ways to perhaps improve the working or living environment for foreigners here in the country, let us first, David, touch upon the merits of the working environment here in Korea for foreigners.
Yeah, of course. So just as an example, I want to point out Vietnam, which is one of the countries that have the most foreign nationals living in Korea. Just in Vietnam, tens of thousands of Vietnamese people, they prepare for the Korean proficiency language test every year because these jobs in Korea, these labor jobs in Korea are so sought after. And I think the major reason, of course, is wages. Compared to wages in Vietnam, they're known to be about 4 times higher on average. And many people in countries like Vietnam, they think of Korean jobs as more lucrative than even jobs in Japan. And I think we also have to mention how, obviously Seoul, but also other cities in South Korea, they're one of the most livable cities in the world. And some of the qualities that they have is that they're very safe compared to other countries. They also have high quality infrastructure, such as public transportation, just the convenience of everything. Very high-speed Wi-Fi and internet connection, 5G, and also affordable healthcare. Because even if a foreign worker works for at least 6 months at a job, earning wages, they are qualified to receive insurance from their workplace. Even if they don't have insurance, the healthcare system here is much more affordable than other countries, obviously compared to the U.S. Or Europe elsewhere. So yeah, those are kind of the qualities that make these jobs very sought after.
Right. Rui, earlier on, David talked about how the OECD regards a country as multicultural if over 5% of its population includes foreign residents. Now, this being said, could you tell us a bit more about the criteria of a multicultural country and which countries currently stand as key examples of multicultural communities?
Yes, the criteria set by the OECD is over 5% of the population. These are foreign residents, naturalized citizens, and second-generation immigrants. So if that surpasses the 5%, it's considered a multicultural society. According to forecasts from Korean authorities, they say by 2040, Korea will consolidate as a multicultural community. It already achieved the 5%, but it will get to 6.5%, which they consider a stronger number, like to consolidate like the term, and almost like saying there's no way back. This is a multicultural society. In terms of the OECD countries, the average of the average percentage of foreign population in OECD countries is 12.2%, and Korea is still far from that. But what they could do, or what pundits say that they could do, is to build better system of integration, education, and inclusion to maybe get to numbers like United States or Germany and Canada, which round up between 14, 12, and 20% of their foreign population. One point that we need to consider, or why are we saying that Korea should be aiming to achieve this, is because of their population is declining. Population is old in general. It has an old workforce. It needs young people, and usually through immigration is that these countries achieve to cover these gaps in modern or first world countries.
Right, and before we further expand on that, David, I'll very quickly like to ask you about this. The UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, it recently shared its findings on South Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about these particular findings?
Yes, so the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, they periodically sort of audit countries that have ratified the International Convention on the Elimination on all forms of racial discrimination. And as one of these countries, earlier this month, the report on South Korea came out, and the report it emphasized how widespread hate speech towards foreigners from different social backgrounds, religions, and also especially towards people of Chinese descent was how widespread it was in Korea. They highlighted in the report, they highlighted the protests towards a mosque being built in the city of Daegu, where students and residents, they have been leading the protests with Islamophobic slurs and actions, such as having public barbecues in front of the mosque or the territory that's being built. They also highlighted the videos being uploaded online of instances of physical abuses towards undocumented migrant workers. And mind you, the country has had a history of being known for providing poor conditions to such migrant workers, such as unpaid wages, their housing being, they're sleeping inside greenhouses. Also, the high incidence of industrial accident death for migrant workers, which is, I think, almost double that of Korean nationals. So all in all, the UN committee, they urged the South Korean government to implement a comprehensive anti-discrimination law, which the country currently doesn't have. So it's technically not illegal. It's technically not illegal for discrimination against race or nationality in the country, and that's why you can see restaurants with no foreigner signs or nightclubs that ban the entrance of foreigners and such as.
Right. Rui, then, speaking as a foreign journalist stationed here in Seoul, what do you believe are some of the improvements that can be made to better accommodate foreign residents here? Of course, aside from better raising awareness of the current discrimination that is present against our foreign residents here.
Yes, I will speak first in consensus of what I read or talked with my colleagues, and then I will tell you a personal experience. First, I think the consensus is that the country needs a comprehensive anti-discrimination law. This will protect vulnerable groups such as migrants, which carry different cultural difference, ethnic difference, etc., etc. And but also will protect naturalized citizens and second-generation Koreans. David has already expanded in many examples on how these migrants suffer discrimination in the country. And what pundits are saying is that without legal guarantees or equal treatment, these things will keep happening. If you don't mind, Sonia, I will want to share something a little bit personal. At some period of my life in Korea, I actually have a marriage visa. My wife is Korean, and at some point, I was desperately looking for employment. And I got to do two things. First, I got to take Korean language lessons in government institutions, where mostly the students were married immigrants, women from Southeast Asia. And secondly, I attended many job fairs directed to these populations. And to be frank, I was a little bit disappointed for two things. First of all, the Korean language lessons seem fine. The talent and the skill of the Southeast Asian women and their Korean skills was much higher than mine. But when I go to the job fairs, which represent the opportunities that they will have in case they want to enter the job market, I have to say that many of the companies that were there seem a little bit shady. They offer only temporary contracts, low wages, and my impression was that a message was a little bit being sent as, this is how we consider your potential. And I think Korea should be a little bit smarter on that. These people, I understand they don't have a strong educational background, but they are very young and adaptable labor force. So they could take some kind of technical courses, training to aim for a professional path or a career path that will give them better opportunities for them and their families. As we have been talking today, there's no way back on this change of demographics in Korea. So what better way than to give opportunities specifically to these women. Another point, and this happens in all sectors through my years here, is that many foreigners that come into the country with workers visa, when they come with a spouse, that is a foreigner spouse as well, it's not that simple for the spouse to get a work permit. So sometimes you have the person with having, let's say, a proper job, but the spouse is in this gray area where that person cannot find a formal employment. So that there is also a lot of room for improvement there. That would be my
Well, thank you for sharing, Rory. Yeah. Those are definitely some things to think about, though. Mm-hmm. David, on a more concerning note, and beyond borders here, quite a number of nations are now choosing to close their once open doors to immigration. Could you tell us a bit more about this reality and the reasons behind it?
Yeah. So first of all, the forced displacement in the world is at an all-time high. In 2023, it was reported that 114 million people were displaced, either through conflicts, wars, or national occurrences. And I think it's good to point out two kind of regions that have been affected largely by this. It's first of all Europe. As Europe became the kind of migrant destinations for people from the Middle East and Africa who were displaced. In the past decade, countries in Europe have welcomed millions of migrants from these regions, and the consequences, or I guess the effects of such a mass migration or immigration, was that there was economic burden, also a strain on public services, and due to the poor adaptability of some of these migrant groups, there were a lot of social clashes and friction between the populations, the natural citizens and the people who migrated there. So I think a consequence of this is that many of the natural residents or the citizens can kind of feel sidelined by these kind of open-door immigration policies. And this kind of gave way for populist governments to rise, fueled by xenophobia and far-right ideologies. So like even Canada, which has been known to be an open door sort of country for decades. For the first time in 25 years, their national survey showed that a majority of their population said this is it for immigration, we should kind of slow down, take a step back. And obviously, I think we have to point out the US, where President Donald Trump has won now 2 elections on his campaign of Make America Great Again. And essentially, he won his first election on the promise of building a border wall between the US and Mexico. And he was cited as calling Mexicans rapists. And he's really attracting the working class who, like I mentioned previously, might feel sidelined. And the ideology really essentially is that the ruling elite is corrupt and indifferent to these natural citizens. And I think his campaign, Make America Great Again, is essentially saying, prioritizing the natural citizens first above all. And yeah, that's kind of been what's happening around the world.
Right, and Rui, I wonder whether this reality of tightening borders to immigration look to affect Korea, or do you think, as you mentioned earlier, because quite a number of scholars here in South Korea are also acknowledging that immigration is a viable option to dealing with an aging workforce here and, of course, a declining population?
Yes, of course. So right now, Korea is in this weird position between need and nerves. So you have the need related to the aging working population and the declining birth rate. And also you have nerves because there are some sectors of Korean society, as pointed out by David, that they don't appreciate immigration, specifically recently of Chinese, of people from China. This is very curious, and I'm glad David mentioned Canada as an example. Today, I don't know, I feel very familiar with the topic because my older brother lives in Canada, so we go to Canada often, and there is this concern in Canada that many Chinese people are buying real estate, and this is increasing the price of the real estate, so they consider that unfair because they are not really Canadians and whatnot. The thing is that I always wonder is that when we hear this news or these concerns of the public, they are really only an economic concern, or they are also related with some kind of racial issue? Why I say this? Because I've never heard of those type of concerns when the investors, let's say in Mexico, you have many US and Canadian people that invest and buy a lot of property, and this also increases the property prices, but there is not directed or generalized hate speech against these people who are doing exactly the same thing that they complain Chinese are doing in their countries. So all these effects, yes, of course, are getting all the way through Korea, these sentiments, and you can see it right now in the elections or since June presidency and the following impeachment. It always carried this topic as an important one. So bottom line is Korea seems to need a younger working age if we think economically, but there is this sentiment that probably make the country emulate other countries that are closing their borders.
Right, but hopefully they will understand that because of our aging society, as you mentioned earlier, we will open our doors to the possibility of more foreign friends then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Ryu, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today. And David, thank you very much for your insights. Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you so much for watching.
Set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe.